obviously working at a music radio station, the thing that prompted my interest was the song, of course. Um,
Sure.
and so we'll probably focus on that a little bit more, but there's the general sense of culture about this. About
Mhm.
when I heard about the book, and the cue point for me anyway was the Rolling Stone excerpt.
Ah,
And when I saw that come out, went, okay, that reminds me of the upcoming 50th anniversary. On the station where I work in Eau Claire, every pretty much every November 10th, we'll play the song,
mhm.
being that it's, we try to be as local as we can. And we're Wisconsin based, so we have a little bit more local flexibility. And so we'll always play that. So you, having studied this, being from Michigan, so all upper Midwestern, start by asking this, even reaching out beyond the song, the whole, everything involving the book. How does that speak to the culture of this broader area, knowing that there are subcultures? Of course, there's not shipping in Eau Claire, of course, we're landlocked, but broadly speaking, how everything resonates to this part of the country, why there seems to be more of not an affinity, but more of a connection to everything involving the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Oh, there's no question about that. And I've been to Eau Claire, and I've been to, of course, Superior, Wisconsin, and Ashland, which are there on the shore, not too far away. What, a couple hours, I think, 2, 3
Yeah.
hours, somewhere in that ballpark. So beautiful country, to say the least. But look, I mean, here's 95% of that book. I did not know 4 years ago when I started this process. And I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We've got a place on Lake Michigan, and I've been in all 5 of the lakes, and I thought I knew this stuff, and I'd written stories about it. But man, there's so little I knew. I can tell you this, that from the Iron Range across Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, which, near you, and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, without that, the Detroit would barely exist. Because that iron is how the Union beat the South in the Civil War, for crying out loud. The first Sioux Locks, who came up in 1855. And then it's how the United States beat the Axis powers in World War II, the arsenal of democracy. Sioux Locks, where all this stuff comes from, in the eastern part of Lake Superior, FDR put 7,000 troops there in the 1940s in World War II. It was the single most guarded point in North America, more than DC, for crying out loud. Why is that? Because if they can't get the iron and the copper and the limestone from the northern part of this region to Detroit, Willow Run, Toledo, Cleveland, and so on, you're not building one B-24 bomber every hour on the hour, and you're not beating the Japanese, you're not beating the Germans. So that's how crucial it was. And here's a fun fact for you also, that in 1960, the census, 5 of the biggest states, of the 5 of the 7 biggest states in the United States were on the Great Lakes. New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Indiana were all top 17. The only ones that broke in otherwise were California and Texas. This Great Lakes region was Silicon Valley. Before Silicon Valley, it was actually even more dominant than that, because Silicon Valley also has Seattle and Austin and the Chinese. There was no one else competing on that plane like the Great Lakes were. So from 1945 to 1975, it's as big as it gets. And here's a fun fact for you. What Great Lakes city was bigger than Miami? Jacksonville, Orlando, certainly. I'm missing a big one here. Miami, of course. Nashville and San Jose, California. And the answer is Toledo, Ohio. All right, they made the glass for those cars. That's how big it is. So Great Lakes shipping, Luke, I had no idea how big it is. It's an invisible industry, basically. I was trying to figure out why that is. And the reason is because even at the heyday, in 1975, with 300 ships, you only got 30 guys in a ship for each ship. These are small crews, basically. That's 9,000 people spread out over 8 states. So you're not going to meet them, basically. And even if they were home, even if they live next to you, you're not going to meet them, Luke, because 9 months out of the year, they're on a ship. No graduations, weddings, birthdays, any of that. So it's an invisible industry. But man, I don't care where you live in North America. It's where your cement comes from. It's where your car comes from. And it's where your food comes from. And all this is Great Lakes shipping, an industry about which I knew almost nothing. One last fun fact for you, Luke, before I give you my overly long answer here and turn it over to you. The Wisconsin Badgers, that's a name you know very well. Right. Well, guess what? They're not named for the animal. They're named for the miners. The miners were nicknamed the Badgers because in the winter they would hide in caves in northern Wisconsin. That's where the Badgers came from. So this is central to your story in Eau Claire, no question.
Yeah, and what I could tell, there's a pride. I mean, there's of course the broader pride, like you're just mentioning there. Even more of a specific one when my wife and I went up to the UP back in 2023. It's literally the first time I've gone over to the border of Michigan. Don't ask me why. It never happened until 2023.
Shame on you, Luke.
I
Shame on
know.
you.
Like what? It was like the one place I could never quite get to. I'm like, I gotta fix this. So finally went up there. We stayed up at Iron Mountain. Took a drive over to Marquette one day. It was like looking at the fall colors. But one of my biggest takeaways was all of the, I guess, commemoration, because it's not as big, but it's still active, of taconite mining. You go over to Marquette and you see the big disposal area, or dispersal area, I should say.
Right.
And all of that, I go, wow, that it's everywhere around here. It's something that is, again, a cultural aspect. Is this the sort of thing that, is it just because this is what they did for so long? How do you assess I keep saying the word pride and culture over and over, and I know it's repetitive, but that's the thing that keeps coming back. Why is that so endemic to the lives of people that were acknowledging it, no matter how many years after that was the core industry?
Right. Great question. And like I said, for one thing, it's an invisible industry, but also we depend so much on it, and the Great Lakes don't get enough credit, frankly, for what they do for the world. The area we're talking about, these 8 states and Ontario surrounding the Great Lakes, produce more food than anywhere else in the world, and it's not even close. Number 2 is Germany, and it's like half as many bushels per year. So this region is feeding the world. Taconite is obviously a huge part of it. What I learned about taconite, there's a guy named Professor Wilson, Purdue graduate who went to Minnesota, where he's a professor. And kind of the way fracking, we're out of the easy gas, the easy oil, basically, in the United States. So, okay, the industry is drying up, literally. And then we discover fracking, and now we're pumping it out like crazy. Taconite is kind of the same way. Taconite is 3 different terms, basically, but one is this byproduct they threw away. They had so much great iron ore in Minnesota and Wisconsin, especially on the northern reaches, that they threw this stuff away, basically. And finally, after World War II, when they're running out of the good stuff, the easy stuff, Professor Wilson's patents come back, and they all realize taconite is this, you turn them into pebbles. In fact, I got some right here. We're on Zoom after all. There's a little bit of taconite for you. 500 million of these go on one ship, go on the Edmund Fitzgerald. So it's quite a lot, but I got a couple. These are little pebbles that they pelletize in Silver Bay, Minnesota now. It's about 1/3 iron ore. It makes it, you pour them into a ship the way you pour cereal out of your box and into the bowl, basically. And it moves around very nicely. It doesn't freeze in the winter. So that taconite basically created a new source of iron out of waste, basically. So this without taconite, we're screwed after World War II. So that's what bring this boom back. It's still working, by the way. They're still loading taconite in Minnesota mainly, but also, of course, Superior, Ashland, and so on, and Marquette. So this is what we live on. And of course, in Silver Bay, Minnesota, they got a statue of Rocky Taconite. One big pebble head, one big pebble body. There's a town called Taconite, Minnesota. You know what that's about. So this taconite, I didn't know anything about it, Luke, when I started 4 years ago. Shame on me. But now I got a jar of the stuff right here at my desk, because without that, I'm not writing a book.
That's true. It made a big difference in society, culture, a lot more than one would have expected. This leads now into the song. As I was listening to your interviews about it, and I'd hope to read it at some point. Side note, I looked up in the local library, like, okay, I wonder if it's out now. I wonder if there are any copies available. Oh, they're probably checked out. There's 17 copies, 5 on order. And I got the stat in front of me. 118 on hold right now here in Eau Claire and the surrounding Chippewa Valley. So there's an interest for the book. Let's just to put it lightly.
Yeah, so I can't sell this book in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I'm not going to sell it anywhere.
Probably, yeah, exactly.
Home base, baby.
It's a hot commodity right now. So as I'm listening to you describe the book, I come away with all these I get these tipping points. All the things that if like maybe this one thing or maybe these two combined would have changed the entire history of everything. Everything from the decision to go north in the extra 14 hours.
Right.
The the amount of the amount of taconite that's on board and the welding. I mean, you could point to that. You could point to that. But then also fast forward to the song. Stuff like, what if Gordon Lightfoot and his band take all 5 days to record the album?
Mm.
Maybe they never record the song. What if Mo Austin doesn't go, hey, this song is pop, that meeting gets canceled for some. There's all these tipping points. And of course, what that means is the significance of the song. So is there one that stands out of the entire story of the Edmund Fitzgerald that is the most critical to, I guess, making what we now know as this whole story happen?
Mm-hmm. Wow. And you're right. I mean, history taught poorly, history written poorly, in my opinion. It goes and then, and it's all inevitable. And of course, we got here. No. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the 2028 election? Because I don't. We have no idea. So don't write history that way either. When you're in the moment, you got a lot of choices, and some things you don't even anticipate. And that's how life really happens. So I want to take the reader back repeatedly to these moments like Professor Wilson and so on, where history could have gone either way. And because Professor Wilson kicks in, the Great Lakes booms for decades more. I'll tell you what, I'd probably break it down to a few things. I can't quite pick one, but I'd pick one heartbreaking thing. Captain Ernest McSorley, considered the greatest on the Great Lakes, and wasn't even close, apparently. Even his rivals said that. Been a captain since he was 31 years old, and now he's 63. So more than half his life, he's a captain of the Great Lakes. Been the best in the business, also beloved by his crew, which is, trust me, very rare back then. These guys tended to be tyrants and throw hot coffee at their crew and all kinds of other nasty stuff. But he tacked on one more trip. He was going to retire the previous week for good, not just for the season, but for good. And 5 of his lieutenants also were. And he tacked on one more trip. Why? Because his wife, Nellie, back in Toledo, was in 24-hour medical care. We think for cancer. I can't quite prove that, but that's what one of the guys surmised. He tacked on one more trip as a bonus. As a captain, you get a bonus to pay for medical care. That bonus is pretty substantial. So that's why he did one more trip before retiring for good. His wife is waiting for him at the dock in Toledo, for crying out loud. That right there, and that's a good Samaritan. That's a good husband, good man. But without that one more trip, we're not talking about this. It doesn't exist. He retires very quietly in Toledo, a hero to his loyal band, but we'd never hear about him. So right there, there's one. Second thing I'd probably say, and it was a good decision at the time. You mentioned earlier, taking the northern route. To give you a quick geography, they normally go straight across Superior from the head of the lakes. That's Duluth, Superior, that area, Superior, Wisconsin. You go above the Keweenaw and down to Whitefish Bay as close as you can, basically hugging the southern shore. And he would do that and his crew 50 times a year in 9 months a year. That's to Toledo and back. It was called the Toledo Express. Every few years, it sounds like, they would occasionally, very occasionally, take the northern route. So instead of going straight across, you're hugging the Canadian shore of Lake Superior, basically, Isle Royale on up. What does this do? It gives you lee of the land, so the wind is much less, the waves are much more reasonable. But then 3 things happen. 1, pay me now or pay me later. So the first 2 legs are better, but your last leg, when the wind is coming across 350 miles of Lake Superior, it's called fetch. Those waves are going to be nasty. You're going to pay a price. And now it's heading you broadside. That's not where captains want to be. So that's one danger. 2, as you mentioned earlier, it's 14 hours longer to go this way than the straight way. What does that do? There's one storm coming in from Alberta he knows about, the Alberta Clipper from Canada, cold, dry air. He does not know almost anything about the second storm from the southwest of the United States, bringing hot, wet air. These two are going to collide right in front of Whitefish Bay. That's the home plate you're trying to get to. And now you've got a catcher blocking your way. It's called the storm right there. So you inadvertently gave that storm a 14-hour head start to beat you to the Whitefish Bay. And third, he does not know it nearly as well. I interviewed 6 crewmen who'd been on the ship before it went down, obviously, because all 29 men were lost, including 2 that year. And they were deckhands. And they said, we didn't take the northern route once. So he does not know it nearly as well. The terrain, you think, so what? It's all water. It's not all water. Caribou Island is 1 by 3 miles. A little nasty spit of land. It's a swamp with bugs. There's no caribou. But it is in the northeast corner of Lake Superior, in front of which is 6 fathoms shoal, which is a fathom is 6 feet. So that's 36 feet, but it ain't. It's 11 feet in some places. This thing drafts 29 feet on a good day, and this is not a good day. It should be nowhere near it. But his long radar is out. His short radar is out, thanks to this nasty storm of the century. The lighthouse at Whitefish Bay, that's out, and even the beacon it sends out is also out. So he's basically traveling blind. He might have gone over 6 fathoms shoal. So taking the northern route, I swear to God, and we can't prove this, but if he went straight across the normal way, I think he would have made it. So there are two things right there. I don't blame him for either one, but the bad luck adds up.
Alas, we end up talking about it because of this. Well, in my case, in particular, at a radio station, talking about this particular song that comes from this. You laid it out. There was the excerpt that I read, and of course, it's in the book that is very detailed. Pretty much answers anything that I was like, okay, well, that's pretty much spells it out right there. There you go. Read the book exactly. But talking to Barry Keane, talking to Rick Haynes, there's some really good insight, obviously, that they provide that I had no idea about the recording of that song.
Right.
But what was maybe the thing that most surprised you about the making of the song from your conversations with them?
Well, unlike you and the good folks in Eau Claire listening to your station, I've heard that song, it's got to be 1,000 times. And I've probably heard it 1,000 times just writing this book, because I put it on a lot, along with the songs of the era. So you think you kind of know the story, and I didn't know that story at all either. And I got lucky. You mentioned Barry Keane and Rick Haynes. Barry Keane is the drummer for Gordon Lightfoot, and Rick Haynes is the bass player. And they were in the studio in 75, 76, working on this. So I just kept getting lucky as far as the crew members still around. Half the families I got to from Ashland, Wisconsin, Makwa, places like that. And even the guys who wrote the stories for the Associated Press and Newsweek are still alive and still sharp. And I just kept getting lucky as far as that goes. So these guys, Barry Keane and Rick Haynes, told me some parts I did not know. And you can get the excerpt in Rolling Stone magazine online, not paywalled, but it's also in the book, of course. The song has got a very unlikely story. So November 10th, 1975 is the night that the Edmund Fitzgerald goes down in the storm of the century, 100-mile-per-hour winds by the end, 60-foot waves, some of them at the end. As one of my experts said, it found itself in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. And no other ship was within an hour of it. So it's just bad luck. Gordon Lightfoot's in his attic in Toronto working on his next song, an Irish sea shanty that he heard when he was 3.5 years old, and he's obviously changing it. But he's a big sailor himself. He did the Port Huron, Michigan to Mackinac Island, Michigan race through Lake Huron. He's a very good sailor. He said to himself while working on the song, "It must be hell on Superior tonight." He's already connecting with it. He did not realize what was happening, of course. So he starts working on the song based on the articles that he read. It's 95% accurate, the song is. He took pains on that. But they're finally meeting to record the album, not this song, in March of 1976 in a studio in Toronto. And they, as you said, they have 5 days to record the song. They've got 11, They have 5 days to record this album. They've got 11 songs to record, not this one. He's not going to record the Edmund Fitzgerald. So they got 5 days to do it. It normally would take 5 days, but this band is good. As you know, they take 3.5 days instead of 5. And they finish up, and Lightfoot says, "Great job, guys. I'll see you later." They're literally packing up their instruments. When the guy in the studio, the producer, says, "Why don't you try that song you've been screwing around with?" This is the Edmund Fitzgerald. And he's never played it for the whole group yet. He's never sung their lyrics yet. He says, "Not ready. It's not ready." He's very self-conscious about this. And the producer says, "Look, man, I'm charging you for 5 days, whether you use them or not. And you got a day and a half left. I'm here. The production crew is here. The band is here. Why not give it a shot?" So he gets talked into it. And he finally agrees and asks them to turn the lights down. And he's quiet and he's getting into the mood of this, which is a very specific place, obviously. And then Barry Keane, the drummer you mentioned, 24-year-old guy at the time, he says, "What do you want me to do?" He's never even heard the song before. And Lightfoot says, "When I get to your part, I'll give you a nod and you just fill in." Okay. A minute and a half goes by. He's into the song. Barry Keane thinks he's forgotten all about me. This song's about to end, like most songs did back then. 2.5 minutes. No, at 1:34 exactly, he turns to Barry Keane, gives him the nod, and he comes in with a drum fill, which sounds like the storm. It's the storm. And he comes in strong with this. That's a pretty gutsy move for a 24-year-old drummer. He's making it up. He's never heard it before. They keep going like this. And after 6.5 minutes, they finish the song. They say, "You know what? That wasn't half bad." And they're kind of surprised by this. And then they say, "Let's try it again." They try it again, not as good. They try it again, not as good. They try it again, not as good. They come back the next day. They try it 5 or 6 more times. It's not as good. The song you hear on the radio is not just the first take. It's the first time the band has ever played the song. And Barry Keane says, "Look, first takes happen once in a blue moon." And Barry's been on 500 albums, something crazy like that. He said, "But at first time we ever played it," he said, "never, ever, ever, never, ever, ever. It might be the first time we know of in recording history." And I said, "How did that happen? That this worked?" And he said, "This is not a song you think your way through. It's a song you either feel or you don't. If you feel it, it works. And if you don't feel it, being more technically proficient is not going to help you." So there's the song. It comes out. They're going to be on the Midnight Special, the old concert show that I'm old enough to remember. Maybe you are too, Luke. It's a great thing. A live band showed up Friday night, live TV, and they played a concert basically. So they're playing 6 of the songs out of the 11. This is not one of them. They did not think it'd be a hit. And finally, as I said, Mo, the expert in Columbia Records in LA, he says, "We're getting traction on this song." They couldn't believe it. A 6.5 minute single. By the end of the year, it is number 2 behind Rod Stewart's "Tonight's the Night" with Brick Eklund. He's his hot Swedish supermodel girlfriend cooing in the background. That was the 70s, people. Trust me. The Me Generation and all that. Disco, you name it. This song is number 2. It's the opposite of all that. It's the opposite of disco. And as Christian Hoare, the music editor at Rolling Stone, told me, he said, "Look, this song never should have worked. It's 6.5 minutes of words, probably the wordiest song until rap comes along. It has no chorus. It has no hook. It has no guitar solo. And as Barry Keane said, it's got no yummy, 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 I've got love in my tummy. There's no one line that you're going to keep on singing. It's the story. It's a story about an industry we know so little about. And I think that's what drew people in. And I've got to be humble enough to recognize without that song, there is no book. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, that's the resonance. Why were FM listeners, and again at that time, that was the transition period, as
Yes.
FM album rock, AOR, and AM was the pop location. That's right as that transition was starting to happen of FM taking over as pop. So I suppose a lot of the FM listeners of the time would have been more of the rock listeners, the classic DJs that can they take the long shot songs back then. So was that this fascination with the story, with the arrangement? Obviously Mo Austin's not around to ask, but what was the thing that was making people like that song off the album?
That is a great question. And you captured the zeitgeist quite well. I'm a 11, 12-year-old kid at this point in the middle of this. So I remember the transition from AM to FM and what that meant. Album rock, as you said. I mean, and they'd go deep cuts and so on. They go the long songs. We bought music. I got to explain this. Albums are these large black circular discs, people, I swear to God, that we put on record players. Go look it up, kids. But you wouldn't buy a song, you'd buy an album, basically, as a rule. But this song, therefore, is even more unlikely that it spun up as a single. Again, it never should have worked. And you have to think, it was 5 years earlier or 5 years later, I'm not sure if it would have, for the reasons you cite. The album drove it, and this guy was a top folk singer at this point. Bob Dylan from Hibbing, Minnesota. He said, "I've never heard a Gordon Lightfoot song I didn't like," and Bob Dylan was not known for compliments, obviously. So what did it? But I got to go back to the story. As Christian Hoare said at Rolling Stone, man, that is some old school troubadour stuff. And I can't spend and name another song like this in the 70s or 80s, I can't think of another anywhere near it. Listeners, man, we underestimate them. They were drawn to the story, is my take. And he captured the mood so well that even the family members, the fellow sailors, the crew guys who had survived, the ones who had been on the ship beforehand and therefore did not go down the ship, they said, I don't know how this guy got it right, but he nailed it. And they said it again and again and again. It's that authenticity, I think, that really pushed it.
I notice that it's not really a melodramatic song, and I know sea shanties aren't that way. They're more designed to be repetitive. That's the
Right.
point of the structure. But there's a certain stoicism I've always noticed with that song. Like the emotions are there if you allow them to be there. Otherwise, otherwise the song stands on its own, very structurally sound. But there's occasional moments, like maybe when the guitar goes up, or there's that little bit of synthesizer right at the that little twinkling that comes in right during one of the key tragic parts of the song. But other than that, is it safe to say that it is mainly the lyrics that draw people into this song?
I
In
think
your
it
view?
has to be. I think you're dead right, Luke, on this one. Certainly the music sets the mood, sets the somber tone, the mystery of it, what a storm is with Barry Keane's drums coming in the way they do. But this is a song you listen to the words and people know the words. Some songs, the words make no sense and you don't even know what you're singing, but hey, it all goes well together. So it happens a lot, I think, actually. This is not one of those songs. This song, it was incredibly well written. And I say that as a writer. He did take 4 or 5 lines, not quite verbatim, but pretty close from the Newsweek article written by Jim Gaines, another guy who's still around. As I said, I interviewed him for this. Because he did such a lyrical job, truly, on his piece that Lightfoot got some of that from him. If he hadn't written the story as well as he did, November 24th, 1975, then maybe the song does not exist either. But it is the haunting quality of it. And again, I think there's just something elemental, fundamental about people in ships in trouble. I mean, this is Noah's Ark. This is Titanic, the Lusitania. We've all been out in a canoe or a rowboat at some point and gotten scared. This is us versus the elements. That draws you in. But again, this is invisible, and Lightfoot felt these guys deserved more attention than they had received. So that definitely drove it. I think you're right about that.
The last question in the legacy. I was stunned to hear the stats, just listening to your interviews, the stat of since the Edmund Fitzgerald, we haven't had shipwrecks. We had all of those in the
Amazing.
century prior to, and then it stopped. So the thought crossed my mind, maybe it's reductive to say, well, the wreck begets the article, begets the song, becomes popular, it becomes part of society. Does that inspire people to go, wow, this is a bigger deal than we thought it was? Thus, let's make the changes necessary to prevent that. Like I said, that might be too simplistic of a take. Would the changes that have essentially prevented this have happened regardless? Had the ship gone down and that was it, would that have happened? Or did it take this becoming a bigger part of our fabric to essentially, I guess, save lives and also save ships?
That's a great question. Impossible to answer exactly, but let's give it a shot. The stats you're talking about, for the listeners who've not read the book, and shame on you, don't wait for the library, go buy the thing. That's so
definitely, yes.
I'm kidding about that, of course. But on a serious note, from 18, is a stat that blew my mind. 2 stats that blew my mind, actually. One, from 1875 to 1975, this is the height of the copper, iron, etc. transportation from Minnesota, Wisconsin, the UP to the factories down below. There were more than 6,000 commercial shipwrecks on the Great Lakes in 100 years. And some estimates say 10,000, some say 25,000, but 6, let's call it the low one. That's 1 per week, every week for a century. That's how common these shipwrecks were. Just disastrous. All of them. Obviously, 30,000 crew on the bottom of the Great Lakes. That's 1 per day, every day for a century. Just crazy, crazy numbers. And as you point out, since November 10th, 1975, since this ship went down, there's been not one. So a century, 6,000 shipwrecks, half a century, 0. How can you explain this? And one thing I did not appreciate when I started my work, the Edmund Fitzgerald was Titanic of its class, basically. It was the greatest ship in the Great Lakes, the most famous, set all the records, broke all the records. This is the golden boy, truly. And it's supposed to have, be around for 80, 90 years easily. So 18 years into it, it's quite short. So that did itself put shockwaves through the industry, no question about it. But would they have been as compelled to make changes they had to make? They should have made a year or two earlier, without the national attention, international attention, really, that the song brought to it. I doubt it. And one of my experts, John Tanner, the former superintendent of the Great Lakes Maritime Academy, he had a great line. He said, "When do you fix anything? And when it's broken." And my analogy here is 9/11. If that was quiet, do we change much? I don't know. But that was such a cataclysmic event for all of us, and not to mention the thousands of victims, that all of a sudden everything changes. Airports change. The FBI, the CIA, everyone's national security. We're all over it. Well, what happened because of this one ship? Because it didn't happen in 58 with the Morale. I've got a chapter on that. The Cedarville in 65 didn't happen. The Bradley in 58. The Morale in 66. These are all equally disastrous shipwrecks, and nothing really changed. So this one, for some reason, woke them up, and I'm willing to credit a lot of that to the song. Forecasting got a lot better. The communication with the captain. Don't just forecast it, the southwestern storm, for example. Tell the captain and tell them on an hourly basis what they're going to be facing. So they got much better about both those things, and simple common sense. The inside flap of the book has got a picture of me on November 11th, the day after the 49th anniversary at Whitefish Point. It's 30, 40 mile per hour wind. I'm like this into the camera. It's not a beautiful shot by any means. My hair is blowing. They had 10-foot waves, 30 mile per hour winds, pretty bad, but nowhere near the 40, 50, 60-foot waves and the 100 mile per hour winds they had on November 10th. On that day, less than a year ago, not one ship had left Whitefish Bay. They were all anchored at Whitefish Bay. I guarantee you, Luke, 49 years earlier, not one of them would have been anchored at Whitefish Bay. Simple common sense kicked in, partly because I'm sure the cataclysm of this, what happened, and the song that drew attention to it. So Gordon Lightfoot literally saved thousands of lives. You can make that case.
Oh, it's an incredible story. It's a tragic story, but it's an incredible one and worth reading. The Gales of November, the Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It's a must read. I'll be reading it. Go buy the book, folks. It's a good one. John, thank you so much for chatting again about this book and about the song, and all the best going forward as people read this as we approach the actual 50th anniversary in 13 days.
I appreciate that. And you can find out more at johnnubacon.com, including the book tour. And I've been to Milwaukee. I'm going to Duluth and some other places not too far from you.
Perfect. Yeah. If anyone hears this, go south, go north, and go check it out. There's a lot more to learn about it. Great. Thank you very much, John. All the best going forward. Take care.
Luke, thank you.
You're welcome.